I think that devising theatre is one of my favourite things to do, but is also one of my most terrifying, and it turns my brain to mush a lot of the time throughout the process. But for some reason, I keep going back for more.
You're listening to the Theatre Thoughts Podcast. My name's Justin, or you can call me Stin. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. If you're one of our many loyal listeners, welcome back. On this episode, we sit down with creative director Natalie Rose of Shopfront Arts Co Op to discuss the newest work of their Harness Ensemble, Where Shall We Meet? Natalie's time in theatre spans over 20 years, and with a wealth of experience behind her, she had more than enough theatre thoughts to satiate our appetite. Don't forget, you can find all of our episode information on our dedicated podcast site. Follow the link in this episode's description to find our link tree, which has all the information you need to follow us on all our socials. So get ready to once again switch on those thoughts and explore the world of the Theatre Thoughts Podcast. Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Theatre Thoughts Podcast. We have a very special guest on today that I've been lining up for a while now. We have 1/3 of the performance collective Post joining us from Shopfront Arts Co Op. She is the creative director at Shopfront Arts and has been involved in Australia's contemporary art scene for the past 22 years. In those years, she's facilitated workshops for young and emerging artists with and without disability. And in 2022, she's continued to develop this work, directing Shopfront Arts' Harness Ensemble in the third full-length work, Where Shall We Meet, as well as devising a new work with young people from Shopfront and the Australian Theatre for Young People titled The Lies We Were Told. And most recently, she's been selected by the Australia Council of the Arts as a 2022 Arts Leader recipient. I'm pleased to welcome Natalie Rose to the podcast.
Hey, Justin. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
So, you are currently directing Where Shall We Meet with Jane Fegan, I believe. We'll get to that in a second, but I want to kind of just talk about you and your career, because like I said at the beginning, you've spanned like 22 years of theatre, which is a massive amount. So I'm sure you have many stories, but could you kind of condense it into a bit of a nutshell of your career and your highlights and who you are?
Sure. That's a simple task, isn't it, Justin, that you've given me there? So I started my theatre practice at the University of Western Sydney, Nepean. It's a course that's no longer there, like many arts courses in this country. And then went on to be a part of Pact Ensemble. They had a year-long ensemble at that point. And during that time, I met the two other members of Post, Mish Grigor and Zoe Coombsmar, and we improvised a scene together and found each other so hilariously funny that we just decided we wanted to make work together. And so we've been making work together since 2004. So that is a very long time, 18 years. And then alongside that, I've always had an individual practice as well of working with young people and emerging artists with and without disability and creating work, devised theatre that is created in collaboration with those people. And then that led me to facilitating workshops in different arts organisations around Sydney, and then landed at Shopfront and haven't really left since then.
Excellent. That's great. Yeah, I like Shopfront. I've only been there maybe once or twice, but it's such a great little space, and you guys do so much, diverse and new work, and also important work, which I think is really great to see.
Yeah, I think one thing that places Shopfront in a unique position within youth arts in this country, but specifically Sydney, is that all of the work that we create with young people and emerging artists is devised by them. So we never go into a room with a script and say, we're doing this show right now. All of the ideas come from the people in the room, and then they get to work with established theatre practitioners who have those extra skills of sort of piecing all of those ideas together to create a cohesive piece of theatre or whatever art form that may be. So Shopfront, we do film as well. We do visual arts. It's a real creative hub for young people to to do work on stage and in front of a camera, but also behind the scenes as well.
Right, okay. And you're currently working on Where Shall We Meet? So Where Shall We Meet, looking at like kind of the bio of it, it's classed as a compelling and powerful performance that focuses on emerging artists with and without disability and mental health diagnosis. So I kind of want to know, where did the beginnings of this idea come from?
I think well, the ensemble has been around since I want to say it was sort of before my time at Shopfront, but I want to say sort of 2013. And it was originally designed by ensemble members who were in a disability program at Shopfront. And once they aged up over 18, they didn't want to make work with the younger kids anymore, and they wanted to create their own ensemble. And then from 2017, which is when I became creative director at Shopfront, we opened up that ensemble. So it wasn't about people with disability creating work, but it was about emerging artists creating work and having a passion to put their stories on stage. And it just may be that some of those ensemble members have disability or mental health diagnosis, but the work is not about that. And so the idea for this show, I mean, this is the third show that the Harness Ensemble have created together. But the idea for this, I think, like a lot of works, I'm sure, around Sydney right now, from lockdown and things, there became this idea of, you know, connection and disconnection from the world and what does the world look like now. But obviously we did not want to make a show about COVID. Everybody's over that.
Yeah.
And everyone's very much over it. But these young adults, you know, for some of them it was their first time living out of home, and then suddenly they're forced into lockdown. So this idea, this exciting idea of like being 19 and living by yourself suddenly becomes a very different thing to what you imagined. And so they were sort of the beginnings of the idea. But from that, in the room, it's expanded to the idea of connection and misconnection and what that means at different points throughout your life. Like when you're 5, you can make best friends with somebody over a pair of shoes they're wearing, and then you're just best friends. Whereas when you get older, that changes a lot, obviously. So, yeah, exploring this idea of connection and misconnection, but also growing up and where do you actually feel the most connected, and how do we shape our persona or who we are based on what people we're interacting with, or what's, you know, we all have these very different groups that we belong to, and I think we all alter our personalities slightly depending on which group we're interacting with. And so what does that look like, and where in the world can you actually be your true authentic self, and how can we celebrate difference and welcome otherness and separateness in this world where we're at times sort of pre-described to fit into these little boxes.
Yeah.
But what happens if none of us fit into the box, sort of thing?
I think that's beautiful. I think, I think that's
quite a lot.
No, it's great. It's great. No, I like what you said about the boxes, because I feel like that is, well, it's a really difficult thing to overcome for a lot of people. You know, they you know, feel like they're being put into a box, and especially when it comes to theatre, it is hard to break away from that box or break out of that box and not be sort of seen as, I don't know, like isolated into that box, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And even within the work, I think we've also been pushing these ideas of what is the relationship between a performer and the audience, what are these rules of theatre, and how can we kind of mess with them within the work as well.
Yeah,
just to sort of push the notion of like what is theatre and what is seen as, you know, theatre has this sort of stigma of being like quite an elite place as well. So what is it to push with that and to put these different stories on stage? And through the work, we've been really trying to challenge the rules around theatre as well.
Well, I guess the question that comes to me then is, where did this passion come from to put this on stage? Like, everything that you're talking about is so important and fresh and important. I already said important in theatre, but like, where did the passion for this come from for you personally?
I think I've always been. I think I've always wanted to see stories on stage that I can relate to, and I grew up in Western Sydney and I don't have a theatre-going family. And so the things I saw were sort of mainstream things and things that, school just sort of dragged you along to, but I never really felt connected with the stories that were on the stage. And I think probably from that, I've always wanted to create work that is reflective of the sort of community it's within. And I've always said as well that I would like to, I strive to make work that, yes, a theatre going audience understands, but also work that my parents understand. And how can you sort of create work that is more accessible in the stories that are on the stage, but even how an audience, I think, feels going to a theatre, like that they feel that they belong in that theatre. And so that has led through to the work I make with young people and emerging artists of empowering them to feel that their story is valid and that their voice should be heard on stage and that their story is as important as, a classic or these stories that are, scripted by one person in a room. Like, if anything, I think they're more important and authentic.
Running a small business? Are you promoting a new show or running a theatre space? Maybe you're looking for an area to reach potential new clients. Why not advertise with us on the Theatre Thoughts podcast? We have a range of packages and prices for you to put your ad right here on the podcast. For more information, contact us at theatrethoughtsteam@outlook.com or by heading to our website, theatrethoughtsaus.online. Something someone said to me recently, we were talking about the great Australian plays, and they said, why are they always around a dinner table? They're always just set at dinner, just these people having dinner together. And I was just like, actually, that's so true. And so I think it's really good to see a new theatre that is reflective of the times that change, because times are changing very quickly and people want to see more sort of like a mirror of themselves, and having that is very important. So I want to ask, for those who aren't sort of theatre people or have been involved in a theatre process before, what does the creative process look like at Shopfronts? Can you give us a quick snapshot of a day in the life of a rehearsal?
Sure. And I think that snapshot, Justin, is probably different depending which work you're working on, because it is very much led by the people in the room. And I think that devising theatre is one of my favourite things to do, but is also one of my most terrifying, and it turns my brain to mush a lot of the time throughout the process. But for some reason, I keep going back for more. Yes, maybe it's like childbirth and at the end you forget what that process is like, so you just do it again.
I think that's the most unique explanation I've heard somebody say about rehearsal process.
So that's what I think it is. It's an 8-hour day of labour, but then at the end there's no baby because it takes more than a day, as many childbirths do, I guess. But I think, in the room there's a lot of improvisation, there's a lot of writing exercises, there's a lot of discussions, and I'm a big believer of the more material we have, the better, because then you can kind of sift through all of that and get, the kernel that is like gold, and let all of the other things go. But I think you have to create so much in order to get to what you're really trying to say, or what, that kernel of the work. I think you need to go very far in and sort of lose yourself for a moment to get to the good stuff.
I completely resonate with that.
I didn't answer but I will say that there's no dinner table in this work.
Good. Well, let's talk.
No stories around the dinner.
Let's talk about the work then, because this is great to hear this. And I know you did make sense about that little gold kernel, and you find that in the creative process, you kind of just working along, and then you go, oh, that's great. God, that's good. Let's keep that. And it's it sticks. But so let's talk about Where Shall We Meet then? So it's obviously directed by yourself and Jane Feig, and it explores ideas of connection and desperate things we would do to hold on to others, and it tackles the messy process of connecting with others in this increasingly disconnected world. And it's been a long time coming. You guys worked on this in late 2021, and then you did another 3-week process in July 2022 this year. So could you kind of give us a bit more of a snapshot or of an overview? I keep saying snapshot, I'm repeating myself today. Overview of the production?
Yeah. So there's 9 ensemble members. And those ensemble members, yes, some have disability and or mental health diagnosis. And the ensemble is extremely diverse in terms of ability, theatre making experience, how they identify themselves, what they do, what they want to do. Like it's a great bunch of ensemble members, and they range from early 20s up to early 30s. And the work,
Right.
yes, is exploring otherness and celebrating difference, but it's also, it is about those things that how far will you go to connect with someone? How far will you go to connect with an audience? How far will you go to, be the most relatable or the person that the people like the best?
Right, yeah.
And the work is at the moment, it's made up of some really beautiful movement pieces. We've had Martin Delamo in with us, choreographing some of the movement stuff, which is just exquisite. And there's also some great text and like some verbatim text as well. There's some beautiful poetic language, but also this sort of quite banal things that people are talking about, which is just, to me, chef's kiss.
Yeah.
And it's funny and it's at times sad. Yeah, I think it's like a real mix of things. And it's a bit silly and absurd, which, I take being silly very seriously. So I think that sort of rubbed off on the ensemble as well.
No, I think that's always good when you have a director who's just silly. It really like resonates with actors, because they're very adaptable people, and they take up like a lot of what they see in front of them. I think that's beautiful.
Thanks, Justin. I hope they say the same thing.
Yeah, you'd hope so, wouldn't you? Well, what do you think audiences will take from this then? So they're going to come, they're going to watch they're going to watch the production, but what do you want them to leave with?
I think the thing I would like the most to leave with is this idea that everyone can just be themselves and just accept that, or don't accept it, but just like go through the world as you. And if you cross paths with people that you really connect with just by being yourself, like what a fantastic experience that is. And if there's somebody that you meet that you don't connect with, then just move on and like don't get hung up by that, but also just be you. I think that's sort of something we're really trying to celebrate. And especially for these young adults, I think it's really important for them to, they're negotiating their way through the world and all of these rules and boxes and things. But when do you just go like, I don't fit in a box, but also why should I have to try and fit into that? Like, no, thank you. No boxes for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the world that we live in now, especially post-COVID, those connections, I think you kind of realize, if you don't connect with someone, like why try to force it? Just move on. And I think that's a really interesting thing for theatre to kind of represent, because theatre is all about finding those connections and those and also disconnections as well. So I think that's a really interesting thing to highlight, especially with the ensemble that you have.
Yeah, and it's been interesting as well. We had a showing back in July with also a mix of invited audience that some are huge theatre goers and others it's someone from our office that we're just pulling in, and their reactions even of the moments when they connect with something on stage and the moments that are quite confronting to them, like of course it's different for every person, like that seems very obvious. But I think it was really nice to know that these ideas we've been working on as well of how do you connect with an audience is very similar to how you connect in life, that there's like some people that you just look at and you're and their tactic is just not in sync with your tactic of your personality.
Yeah.
So you just get to look at someone else and just block them out, sort of thing. And I think it's been really nice to sort of play with these two ideas of what we see on the stage and how that is mimicked in life.
That's great. Yeah. And I think what I've found most recently is I kind of struggled to connect with the ways people think sometimes. I don't know if it's post-pandemic, like change of attitude, or it's just me getting older. But that resonates with me. Just if that person you're not connecting with, just block them out. Well, look at the next person. And you find those connections in theatre.
Completely. And at least there's 9 ensemble members on stage. So if you don't connect with one, just look at one of the other 8. Like, go wherever you want.
Yeah. Well, the last thing I want to ask you is what's next for Shopfront? Where would you like to go? I don't mean so much like an end goal, because I feel Shopfront is always evolving. But what do you kind of see is the next step in the process of Shopfront?
What a simple question, Justin.
I know. I like to keep them simple.
So simple. I think you're right that Shopfront is constantly evolving, and it is constantly evolving because we are so responsive to the young people who call Shopfront, home and are our community. And so a lot of our program is actually designed by the young people, and they feed back on it. They give us ideas of things they want in the program. And that, I think, is really exciting that they get to come up with that and we will make it happen for them. So I think I want to stay open to our young people and to what they want. I also, I think Shopfront is amazing at creating these opportunities for emerging artists and creating a space for emerging artists to create work. And if that means at times fail, that is really important in developing your practice and becoming a better theatre practitioner. So I want to make sure that those opportunities are still there for emerging artists. We've just planned our 2023 season, and it's so exciting of the things we've got on. And we've this year we also introduced 5 paid advisory panels for young people, and they are young people, people with disability, culturally and linguistically diverse, LGBTQIA+, and First Nations. And those panels are feeding back on everything that Shopfront does. And the youngest advisory member is 10, which I think is super, super great to have a paid opportunity for a 10-year-old to feed back on what Shopfront's doing. And from everything to what the building looks like, to what the space we create, what does that, the vibes in the building, what we program. And so those advisory panels have been extremely important in feeding back on our 2023 program, which is just going to be, I'm really, really excited about. So I think really just being responsive to our community members and the people who make Shopfront what it is.
Wow, that's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. 10 years old is your youngest on the board.
Yeah, 10 years old.
Wow, what an opportunity.
Yeah.
Wow, good on you. That's amazing. I've never heard that before.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, incredible. Well, thank you so much, Natalie, for joining us. So Where Shall We Meet is at Shopfront Arts Co Op from October 5th to October 9th, and you can get tickets at shopfront.org.au. Natalie, thank you so much for your time. This has been insightful and incredible, and it's filled me with a lot of hope about where theatre can go moving forward.
Thanks so much, Justin. It's such a pleasure to speak to you.
A massive thank you to Lily Heyman for helping to organise today's episode. Thank you to Natalie Rose for joining us as our guest on the podcast. Tickets for the performances of Where Shall We Meet, playing at Shopfront Arts Co Op from the 5th to the 9th of October, can be booked at shopfront.org.au or by searching in this episode's description. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Help us support our podcast team and our Theatre Thoughts reviewers by joining our Patreon for as little as $3 a month, or buy us a coffee by donating $5 and help to fund new independent Theatre Thoughts. Follow the link tree in this episode's description for more information. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time here on the Theatre Thoughts podcast.